Unaware my husband didn't know I secretly owned the $2 million apartment, he brought his pregnant mistress to move in. What I did next left them with nothing. He didn't just cheat. He walked a pregnant woman into a $2 million apartment, dropped his keys on the entry table like a king returning to his palace, and told his wife to pack her things so he could give their bedroom to someone else. That afternoon, Emily Carter came home from a simple grocery run, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, mind already thinking about dinner and the quiet conversation she'd been planning to have with her husband. She was tired, steady, and still holding on to the version of Mark she thought she knew. Instead, she opened the door and heard a stranger's giggle drifting from the living room. An apple slipped from her bag and rolled across the floor as a young woman stepped out, one hand on her belly, eyes full of hope built on promises Emily had never heard. Behind her, Mark appeared, relaxed, comfortable, standing in the middle of the apartment like a man giving a tour of property he believed he owned. "So, this is where we will live?" the woman asked softly. Mark didn't flinch. He didn't look ashamed. He looked Emily in the eye and said, almost bored, "You need to give us space for a while." He thought he was upgrading his life. He thought Emily would quietly leave her own home. He thought this apartment, these walls, this view, all existed because of him. What he never imagined was this. The woman he was trying to push out of the door was the sole legal owner of that $2 million apartment, an inheritance signed to her name long before he ever held a copy of the keys. For years, Emily had moved gently, saying nothing, keeping her documents, her lawyer, and her true position tucked away like a quiet shield. He believed she was powerless. He believed she had nowhere to go and nothing to stand on. He had no idea she had already gathered every paper, every clause, and every quiet piece of truth she would need, not just to protect herself, but to make sure the people who walked into her home on lies would not walk out with anything that was hers. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Emily's strength stay hidden behind closed doors. When you click that button, you stand with every person who was betrayed in their own home, but chose strategy over screaming, proof over panic, and dignity over despair. Please subscribe now, and in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. Emily's hands were shaking before she even understood why. A sudden rush of heat climbed up her chest, the kind that hits a person right before a truth they've avoided finally stands in front of them. She stood frozen beside the tall bookshelf in her living room, gripping the edge so hard her knuckles turned white. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper, an old instinct waking up. Emily Carter, 35 years old, calm by nature and gentle in spirit, was a woman who could walk through storms without raising her voice. People described her as steady, thoughtful, the kind who listened more than she spoke. She lived quietly, never drawing attention to herself, never showing off anything she owned. And that was intentional. Her grandmother had raised her to move softly, even when the world was loud. She lived in a $2 million apartment, yet no one who met her would ever guess it. The floors were polished, the windows wide, the view beautiful, but there were no flashy signs of wealth. Her clothes were simple. She wore a small silver necklace, nothing designer, just a delicate piece passed down from her grandmother. She didn't chase luxury or recognition. She didn't need to. She had inherited more than money. She had inherited discipline, restraint, and a way of seeing life that protected her from greed. Real estate agents had told her more than once, "This place is worth at least $2 million." Emily had simply nodded, thanked them, and gone back to living as if the value of her home was just a number on paper, not her identity. But on this quiet afternoon, something inside her stirred, reminding her that blessings could also become targets if not protected well. Her mind slipped back to when she was 21. The smell of hospital antiseptic, the soft beeping of monitors, her grandmother, her anchor, her teacher, lying weak but still holding that sharp, clear look in her eyes. "You listen to me," her grandmother whispered, voice thin but full of power. "Don't let anyone calculate your worth for you. Protect what you have and who you are." Emily remembered clutching her hand tightly, tears burning her eyes. The old woman had always been wise, but that day her words felt heavier, as if they were meant for something Emily hadn't lived through yet. The door opened gently, and her grandmother's longtime lawyer, Jonathan Hale stepped inside. He was a tall man in his 50s with calm eyes and a steady way of speaking. He had been in their lives for years, handling family matters with quiet care. "Emily," he said softly as he approached, holding a sealed envelope. "She wanted you to have this right away." Emily took the envelope with shaking hands. Jonathan lowered his voice, glancing at her grandmother, who had finally closed her eyes to rest. "This apartment," he murmured, tapping the envelope lightly. "The one now valued at around $2 million. Never attach another person's name to it. Keep it separate. Keep it safe. Your grandmother was very clear about that. The deeds will stay in my office. You'll have copies at home if you ever need them." At the time, Emily didn't fully understand why it mattered so much. She hadn't thought about marriage, hadn't imagined sharing her life with anyone yet. But she listened. She always listened. That day, she became the legal owner of the $2 million apartment, her grandmother's final, carefully protected gift. And from that moment on, she guarded it the way she guarded her heart. She never bragged, never told anyone the price, never mentioned the number to friends, co-workers, or even the man she later married. Mark. Mark Carter, her husband of 6 years, a man who had walked into her life with an easy smile, quick jokes, and a way of making her feel seen after long years of quiet living. In the beginning, he had admired her calm nature, her loyalty, her gentle way of caring for others. He said she made him feel grounded, balanced. But Emily had always sensed something fragile under his charm, an insecurity he tried to hide behind laughter and compliments. She remembered the first time he stayed over, the way he looked around the apartment and let out a low whistle. "Wow," he had said with a grin, "you really know how to make a place feel warm." She had smiled then, saying nothing about the property papers with only her name. She didn't tell him that real estate agents saw this space as a $2 million prize. She didn't reveal that this home was her inheritance, her safety, her grandmother's last protection, wrapped in bricks and walls. She believed love didn't require financial breakdowns. She believed trust was enough to build a life on. And she believed Mark loved her for who she was, not for where she lived. But the shaking in her hands today told a different story. It wasn't random. It wasn't nerves. It was memory, warning, instinct. She forced herself to breathe slowly, pulling air deep into her lungs. She reached up and touched her necklace, the old silver pendant, grounding herself the way she always did when the world felt uncertain. Then a sound broke the stillness, a dull thump from the direction of the kitchen, like a phone vibrating hard against the counter. Emily turned toward the noise, her heart settling into a strange, steady rhythm while her mind sharpened like a blade. A quiet voice inside her whispered, not with fear, but certainty. Something in this $2 million home is about to change. And as she stepped toward the hallway leading to the kitchen, she couldn't shake the feeling that the truth she'd avoided for years was finally reaching for her. Piece by piece, the phone rang with a sharp vibration that cut straight through the air. It wasn't loud, but the way it buzzed across the kitchen counter made Emily jump, as if something dangerous had entered the room. She was only a few steps away when Mark rushed in from the hallway and snatched the phone so fast it slipped slightly from his hand. His eyes widened, his breathing quickened, and for a brief second, just long enough for Emily to notice, fear flickered across his face. Then he forced a smile. "I've got it," he said, voice too quick, too controlled. Without meeting her eyes again, he stepped out of the kitchen and pulled the door almost shut behind him, not slammed, not gently, just enough to create a barrier. The intensity of the moment hung like a warning. Emily stayed completely still, fingers resting on the back of a chair, listening to the muffled voice on the other side of the door. Mark's tone dropped. He wasn't speaking like a husband talking to a friend or coworker. He sounded careful, soft, comforting. She leaned slightly closer. "We'll figure it out," he whispered. "Just hold on." Her stomach tightened. Mark Carter, 37 years old, her husband of 6 years, had always been a man of contradictions. Charming enough to win the room, funny enough to make strangers smile, but inconsistent in ways that left small shadows behind him. He could be warm and affectionate one moment, distant and unreachable the next. Emily had always chalked it up to stress, work, life, pressure. things she didn't want to make bigger than they were. But today, watching him grip his phone like a lifeline, she felt a faint tremor of doubt. Mark returned to the kitchen, cheeks flushed as if he had been running. He brushed a hand through his hair and flashed an easy smile, the kind meant to distract, not reassure. "Just work stuff," he said too quickly. "Nothing important." He kissed her cheek and reached for a glass of water. His hand trembled just a little as he lifted it. Emily saw everything. She always did. She simply chose not to speak on things she couldn't prove. Not yet. Later that evening, Mark sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. Emily, sitting at the dining table paying bills, noticed something strange on their joint account. A recurring charge. Same amount, same description every month. Medical consultation. Emily frowned. Neither of them had been to any doctor recently. She leaned closer to the screen, making sure she wasn't misreading. Another charge, same place, same description, same clinic name she didn't recognize. Her fingers paused above the keyboard. A quiet suspicion whispered through her mind. When she looked up, Mark had shifted on the couch, turning his screen slightly away from her. He wasn't subtle. He didn't try to be, because he thought she trusted him absolutely, and she did. But trust, she had learned long ago, didn't mean blindness. "Everything all right?" Emily asked gently. "Yeah, just tired." His answer was smooth, practiced. He didn't even glance her way. Another micro crack. Another quiet warning. The next afternoon brought the moment that deepened the crack. Emily carried the laundry basket into the bedroom. The air felt calm, ordinary, until she opened the hamper. At first, she reached in without thinking. Then her fingers brushed something unfamiliar. Smooth, silky, and scented with a floral perfume she didn't own. She pulled out a woman's scarf. Elegant, soft, new, not hers. Emily's breath stopped. The scarf, light pink with delicate stitching, felt out of place in her hands, like a clue dropped on purpose. She stared at it, eyes narrowing slightly, mind racing through memories, recent moments, odd comments, unexplained behavior. Had someone else been in their home? No. Someone had been close enough to Mark to leave this behind. Emily didn't confront him. Her emotions didn't explode outward. They drew inward, becoming sharper, colder, clearer. She folded the scarf slowly, almost gently, and placed it inside her drawer. As she closed the drawer, she whispered, barely audible, "If there's truth, it will always come home." Her voice held no anger, only certainty. That night, Mark changed his phone password. He didn't announce it. He didn't hide it either. He simply typed something different, screen glowing in the dark living room. Emily saw it from the hallway. He never noticed her watching. For the first time in their marriage, she felt something slip between them, something she could no longer ignore. She rubbed the silver necklace at her throat, grounding herself in the memory of her grandmother's voice. "Protect what you have and who you are." Emily walked back to the bedroom, her expression calm but her heart awakening with new awareness. As she closed the door behind her, a quiet thought formed, soft but heavy. This was only the beginning. The sound hit her like a blade, sharp, sudden, impossible to ignore. Emily had just stepped into the hallway, carrying folded towels, when Mark's voice cut through the quiet apartment. It wasn't angry, it wasn't stressed. It was soft, too soft. The kind of tone a man uses when he wants someone to feel safe, wanted, chosen. "Don't stress," he whispered. "Everything's going to work out. I told you, we'll raise the baby together." The towels slipped from Emily's hands and scattered across the hardwood floor. A baby? Her heartbeat slammed in her chest, loud enough that she wondered if he could hear it through the wall. She moved closer, not to spy, but because her legs carried her without thought. She tried to slow her breathing, but her body refused to calm. Inside the room, Mark continued speaking, his voice coated with warmth she hadn't heard from him in months. "I'll take care of you, I promise. She doesn't suspect anything." The words tore something inside her. For a long moment, she didn't move at all, her mind flooded with cold clarity. He wasn't comforting a coworker. He wasn't handling a family issue. The softness in his tone belonged to intimacy, something shared, something built in secret. And now, a baby? Her world tilted, But she didn't fall apart. Instead, everything slowed. She sank down beside the fallen towels, pressing her palm to the floor to steady herself. Her eyes unfocused, drifting into memory. Another time, another version of Mark, before the shadows grew between them. They were newly married, young, hopeful. Sitting on the edge of their bed, the apartment filled with quiet evening light. Mark had been staring at the floor for a long time before he finally spoke. "Sometimes," he murmured, "I feel like you don't need me." Emily turned toward him, surprised. "Why would you say that? You handle everything on your own. You don't get stressed. You don't brag. You don't lean on me." He swallowed. "It makes me feel like I'm replaceable." She had taken his hand gently, pressing it against her heart. "Mark, I chose you," she whispered. "Not because I need you to do things for me. I chose you because you make life feel less lonely." He kissed her forehead. She believed that moment changed everything, but maybe it changed him instead. Maybe her calm strength made him feel small. Maybe her hidden wealth, though he didn't know the number, made him feel like a guest instead of a provider. Maybe he wanted someone who looked up to him, someone who needed him, someone who wasn't her. Emily blinked back into the present as she heard Mark's low voice again. "I'm going to tell her something soon. Just trust me. We'll have a place to stay. I've got it all handled." Her stomach twisted. He wasn't just cheating. He was making plans. Future plans. Family plans. Without her. Her breath hitched, but she kept her body still. She had learned long ago, stillness reveals more than confrontation. The call ended. She heard him set the phone down, exhale deeply, and walk toward the door. Emily stood up, gathered the scattered towels, and forced her face into calm. When the door opened, Mark looked startled to see her. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Just dropped something." He nodded, relief washing over him because he believed she still trusted him completely. Emily watched him walk past her, watched the tension in his shoulders, the quick checking of his phone, the subtle panic he tried to hide, and she felt something shift inside her. Quiet but firm, not anger, not despair, understanding. The pieces were connecting. The scarf, the secret calls, the recurring charges at a clinic, the insecurity he never healed, and now, the baby. She folded the last towel, her hands steady again. As she placed it on the shelf, a soft thought drifted through her mind, almost like a whisper. If he's hiding a child, what else is he preparing for? The moment hit her like a violent jolt, sharp enough to make her breath snag in her throat. Emily jerked awake before sunrise, her heart pounding as if someone had shaken her from the inside. There was no sound, no movement in the apartment, but her body felt the warning before her mind caught up. Something was coming, something she could no longer ignore. She sat up straight, gripping the blanket, her chest rising and falling too fast. The memory of Mark's whisper, "We'll raise the baby together," echoed again, slicing through the silence like broken glass. Her hands tightened around the blanket until her fingers ached. For a few seconds, the intensity swallowed her whole. Her mind flashed with images, the scarf, the secret calls, the baby. Then slowly, very slowly, her breathing settled. Her heartbeat steadied. Her expression changed from shock to something sharper, calmer, more dangerous. She wasn't going to fall apart, not until she knew the whole truth. She slipped out of bed quietly and moved through the apartment with purpose. Emily didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't confront him. Her silence was not fear. It was strategy. She had learned from her grandmother. A calm mind sees more clearly. She picked up Mark's laptop bag from the dining chair, not to search through it, but to see what he carried. A new planner was tucked inside, edges worn from use. She set the bag down exactly as it had been and walked to the shared digital calendar on their home computer. Doctor appointment every month, labeled as consultation, always scheduled at the same clinic she'd seen on the bank statement. Emily leaned her hands on the desk. So it wasn't just the recurring charges. He had been planning this for months, consistently, secretly, carefully. Her heart squeezed, not from shock anymore, but from clarity. She whispered to herself, You weren't just unfaithful, you built another life. Later that morning, after Mark left early, claiming he had meetings all day, Emily got dressed with steady hands. A soft sweater, comfortable jeans, no hint of distress. She tied her hair neatly, picked up her bag, and walked out the door. She wasn't going to confront him without proof. She was going to prepare. She arrived at a quiet office building where an older man with silver hair and steady eyes greeted her with a warm nod. Jonathan Hale, her grandmother's trusted lawyer, and the man who had been in her life since she was a child. "Emily," he said gently, "I didn't expect you today." "I wanted to update my will," she replied, voice calm, holding her bag close. "And I need advice about my marriage." Jonathan studied her face. He had known her long enough to see past the surface. She did not look broken. She looked controlled. And when Emily looked controlled, it meant something was very wrong. He gestured for her to sit in his office. Papers were neatly stacked on his desk, and photos of her grandmother hung on the wall, constant reminders of the woman who shaped Emily's strength. As Jonathan reviewed the documents she handed him, he paused. "Is everything all right at home?" he asked carefully. Emily lifted her eyes. They were calm, deep, unreadable. "I discovered my husband has another woman," she said quietly. "She's pregnant. He's been taking her to a clinic and paying for her from our account. I don't want a scene. I want to be protected." Her silence carried weight. Her tone held facts, not drama. Jonathan understood without needing more. He nodded slowly and pulled out a new folder labeled with her name. "Then let me give you some advice," and he said. "First, the apartment. The deed and original will stay here, locked. We'll prepare certified copies if you ever need to show them. Second, document everything. Dates, charges, any proof you find. Third, do not confront him until you are ready and legally covered." Emily felt something inside her settle into place, the beginning of a plan. She handed him the folder she brought, full of copies of deeds, legal papers, and inheritance documents. Jonathan locked the originals away securely and noted what needed to be prepared. As she stood to leave, Jonathan said softly, "Your grandmother would be proud of how you're handling this." Emily managed a small, steady smile. "She taught me everything." She walked out of the office building, her pace steady, her mind focused. The pieces were forming, aligning, becoming clear. But just as she reached her car, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A single message from Mark. "We need to talk tonight." Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment. She had a feeling she already knew what he wanted to say. She just didn't know yet how far he was willing to go. The shock hit her before she even stepped inside. Emily unlocked the front door with one hand while holding grocery bags in the other. Mark's earlier message, "We need to talk tonight," still sat heavy in her chest. She had spent the last weeks quietly watching, saving bank screenshots, noting his appointments, but she hadn't expected this. The moment the door pushed open, she froze, stunned by a sound she had never heard inside her home before. Giggles, soft, playful, a woman's voice. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't breathe. For a long second, she couldn't even move. Her body reacted faster than her mind, warning her that something terrible waited on the other side of the hallway. She took one step in, then she heard it, clear, close, unmistakable. A young woman whispered, "Are you sure she won't walk in on us?" Everything inside Emily stopped. The grocery bag slid from her fingers. Time slowed. An apple rolled out, hitting the hardwood floor and bouncing softly across the hallway like a cruel announcement of what was happening behind the living room wall. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She didn't blink. She didn't take another step. She stood there, suspended between disbelief and the truth she feared. Footsteps approached. Mark appeared first. He turned the corner with the relaxed swagger of a man who believed he was in complete control. His expression shifted the moment he saw her. Guilt flickered for a fraction of a second, but arrogance quickly smothered it, the way dirt covers a dying flame. Behind him stepped a young woman in her 20s, soft features, long hair, and a hand placed over her very obvious pregnant belly. Her name would soon be known, Anna. The woman from the clinic bills, the woman from the whispers. The woman likely connected to the scarf hidden in Emily's drawer. But for this moment, She was only the stranger who had stepped into Emily's home without hesitation. Anna looked around the apartment with bright eyes and said, in a tone filled with comfort and boldness, "So, this is where we will live?" Emily didn't speak. She didn't gasp. She didn't even step backward. She just looked at her husband, the man she trusted, the man she waited for, the man she believed would never turn their home into a crime scene of betrayal. Mark cleared his throat. "Emily," he began, as if discussing something casual. "This is Anna. She's staying here with me. We'll be using the master bedroom, so I need you to pack your things and give us space for a while." Every word carried the weight of finality, no apology, no hesitation, no shame. He spoke like someone who believed his decisions were unquestionable, like someone who believed he owned everything, including the home she inherited. Emily looked at him, searching his face, trying to recognize the man she married, the one who once said he couldn't live without her, the one who pretended to be broken by her strength, the one who whispered promises while hiding a child with another woman. Anna shifted nervously. Mark placed a reassuring hand on her back, the touch intimate, protective, practiced. Something inside Emily cracked, but the pain didn't show on her face. Her expression stayed calm, still. Eyes hollow, empty in a way that made the room colder. She knelt slowly to pick up the groceries, placing each item back into the torn bag even though it barely held together. Her movements were smooth, steady, almost gentle, as if she were handling breakable glass instead of the pieces of her life. Mark watched her with impatience. "Well," he asked, "do you understand what I'm saying?" Emily stood, smoothed her clothes, and finally lifted her gaze. Her voice was quiet, level, deceptively soft. "Give me a moment." Mark smirked, assuming he'd won. Anna sighed with relief, shoulders dropping. But Emily wasn't retreating. She wasn't broken. She wasn't surrendering her home. Inside her silence, something powerful awakened, something she inherited from the woman who taught her to protect what was hers, and something she had already started to prepare with her lawyer. Emily turned toward the bedroom, each step slow, controlled, deliberate. She wasn't leaving. She was preparing. As she reached the door, a faint thought whispered through her mind, a warning, a promise, a signal of what was coming. This wasn't the end. This was only the first move. Emily shut the bedroom door behind her with more force than she intended. The sound exploded through the room, sharp, loud, shaking her chest. It felt like a scream trapped inside wood. She stopped in the middle of the room, breathing hard. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Her fingers trembled. For a moment, she felt as if her entire body was breaking apart from the inside. Everything she had witnessed just minutes ago, the young pregnant woman, Mark's cold arrogance, the words, "give us space," all of it crashed over her like a violent wave. Her knees weakened. She gripped the edge of the bed to keep from falling. The intensity flooded her. The betrayal, the humiliation, the disbelief. Then, slowly, her breath steadied, her heartbeat quieted, her vision sharpened. The storm inside her didn't disappear. It changed shape. She sat on the edge of the bed and lifted her eyes to the small picture frame on her nightstand. Her grandmother's face smiled back at her, warm, strong, knowing. A woman who survived hardship with grace and intelligence. Emily reached out and touched the glass lightly. The room seemed to fade around her. A flash of memory rose, her younger self sitting beside her grandmother in the garden. Light breeze, soft sunlight, the old woman's voice calm and serious. "When someone tries to take what's yours," she said, brushing dirt from her hands, "don't shout, don't panic, don't fight the way they expect." She looked Emily straight in the eyes. "Let them learn who they're dealing with." Emily swallowed, remembering the weight of those words. At the time, she thought it was advice for life in general. She never imagined she would need it in her own home, against the man who wore her last name. The memory faded, leaving the room silent again. Emily straightened her spine. The trembling stopped. The shock thinned. Something stronger took its place. Focus, clarity, a cold understanding. She stood and walked to her dresser. The top drawer slid open with a soft sound. Inside, folded neatly, lay the scarf she found weeks ago. The scarf she never confronted Mark about. She stared at it for a long moment. This wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was proof, a symbol of how long this betrayal had been blooming behind her back. Emily lifted it slowly, letting the soft fabric fall across her hands. "So this is hers," she whispered. Her voice held no bitterness, only truth. She folded the scarf one last time and placed it gently back into the drawer. Then she closed it with a steady hand. No crying, no yelling, no breaking down. She wasn't a woman destroyed. She was a woman preparing. Emily walked to the window and looked out at the city lights below. Her reflection stared back at her. Calm eyes, set jaw, the look of a person who had stepped out of the role of victim and into something far more dangerous. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A soft vibration, but to Emily it sounded like a summons. She picked it up, stared at the screen for a few seconds, then tapped a number she had memorized long ago. A calm voice answered after the first ring. "Jonathan Hale speaking." She didn't wait, didn't hesitate, didn't soften her tone. "Hi," Emily said quietly. "It's me." She glanced toward the bedroom door, the door separating her from the man who thought he could replace her in her own home. Her grip tightened around the phone. "We need to activate everything we discussed. The other woman is here. He tried to move her into the apartment and push me out." There was a pause on the other end, a long one, the kind that held understanding, calculation, and a plan already forming. Then a simple reply. "Come by tomorrow to sign the divorce petition. I'll email your husband's employer what we discussed, and I'll prepare a formal notice for them to vacate. Keep yourself safe tonight. Don't confront more than you already have. The papers and the law will speak for you." Emily ended the call and placed the phone down carefully. Her eyes hardened, her breathing steadied. Every piece of her felt aligned with a purpose she could no longer ignore. She stood still for a moment, listening to the faint sound of distant footsteps outside the room. Mark and Anna moving, talking, settling into their new space like they belonged. Emily didn't react, but as she turned off the light, one quiet thought whispered through her mind. Next time that door opens, everything will change. The slam of the dining room chair against the floor shook the entire apartment. Emily pulled the chair back with such force that both Mark and Anna flinched. The intensity in the room arrived like a storm, silent at first, but heavy enough to make the air feel tighter, darker, colder. Mark had never seen her move like that. He had seen her sad. He had seen her worried. But this quiet command was new. "Sit," she said, not loud, not angry, just absolute. Mark frowned, trying to mask his sudden unease with irritation. Anna lingered near the hallway wall, arms wrapped protectively around her belly, unsure of whether she should obey. But the look on Emily's face left no room for argument. They both sat. Emily walked to the dining table with slow, measured steps. She set down a thick, organized folder, too thick to be normal paperwork, too neat to be random, the kind of folder that meant planning, gathering, preparing. Mark let out a sharp scoff. "What are you doing, Emily?" he asked with forced bravado. "Are you going to lecture us? Because honestly, you should be." Emily opened the folder. "I'm not here to lecture," she said. "I'm here to make things clear." She slid the first document across the table. Mark looked down. He froze. It was the property deed. Her name, Emily Carter, printed boldly at the top. But in the legal description beneath, the dates told the real story, acquired years before their marriage as an inheritance. Only her name, no joint ownership, no dispute. Before he could recover, she slid the next document, her grandmother's will. The clause stating the apartment belonged to Emily alone, inherited before marriage, protected under inheritance law, non-marital property, not subject to division. Anna's lips parted as she read the line that made her hands tremble. Then came the financial breakdown, every payment made on the apartment since Emily inherited it. Property taxes, maintenance, building fees, all from her account. Never from Mark's, not a single cent. Mark's face drained of color. This can't," he stammered. Emily placed the next set of papers. Detailed photos she had taken in secret. Photos of Mark meeting Anna. Photos of him holding her belly. Photos of them laughing in public. Time-stamped. Location tagged. sent earlier that day to her lawyer and to his company's HR inbox. Anna's breath hitched. A small gasp escaped her before she slapped her hand over her mouth. Her confidence, the confidence she carried when she walked into the apartment as if she belonged, cracked down the middle. Mark's shoulders stiffened, his jaw clenched. His eyes darted between the papers, searching for a loophole, a mistake, something he could twist or deny. But Emily had left no room for escape. "This place is yours," when he finally choked, voice thin. He said it like a man discovering that the ground beneath his feet had never been real. Emily met his eyes, her face unflinching, her voice cold enough to silence the room. "Yes, Mark, this place is mine." Her hand slid one more document toward him, a legal notice printed freshly that morning, a formal notice terminating his and Anna's right to occupy the apartment, backed by the fact that Anna was never on the lease or deed, and Mark's name was on nothing. It gave them a short deadline to leave and warned that if they refused, she would pursue full legal eviction and protective orders. Anna's hand fell from her mouth, trembling. How can you make us leave so fast?" she whispered. "My baby." "This apartment," Emily said clearly, "is not your home. You entered without my permission. You stayed without right. You believed a lie because you wanted to believe it." Her voice was sharp enough to cut through every illusion. Mark stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "You can't do this," he shouted. "This is my home. I've lived here for years. Emily's reply was ice. "You lived here because I allowed it. But that ends today." Mark's chest heaved. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth, panic undoing his arrogance thread by thread. Emily continued, each word precise. "You have 10 minutes to gather your things and leave the apartment. I've already called the police to be present. They'll treat this as a domestic disturbance, an unauthorized stay. They know whose name is on the deed." Anna's eyes widened in horror. "Police?" she whispered. Emily didn't blink. "I reported unauthorized entry and harassment. I gave them copies of the deed. They're on their way now, to keep the peace while you leave." Mark's voice cracked as he stepped closer to her, his bravado collapsing. "Emily, please don't do this. We can talk. We can figure this." She stepped back, creating a line between them he could no longer cross. "We are past talking." Anna rose from her chair shakily, clutching her stomach, her voice barely a breath. "I didn't know it wasn't his," she said. "He told me he paid for it. He said he owned everything." Emily didn't look at her. She didn't need to. Outside the apartment, the faint whirring of a siren began, soft, distant, but unmistakable. Mark heard it. Anna heard it. Emily heard it. The final crack of dread spread across Mark's face. Emily gathered the folder, closed it with a decisive snap, and said quietly, "Your time is almost up." As the sirens grew louder, Emily turned her gaze toward the door, knowing the real downfall had only just begun. The pounding on the front door came like thunder, loud, forceful, unavoidable. Mark flinched so hard he nearly stumbled. Anna gasped, clutching her belly as if the sound had jumped inside her. Emily didn't move. She stood still in the center of the dining room, steady as stone, her eyes fixed on the doorway. The pounding came again. "Police! Open the door!" This time Mark's face collapsed. His arrogance vanished, replaced by fear so raw it made his knees shake. He looked at Emily as if begging her to undo the very scene he created. "Emily, please," he whispered, "just tell them it's a misunderstanding." But she didn't look at him, didn't answer, didn't blink. She simply said, "The door's unlocked." 2 uniformed officers entered, firm and calm. Officer Daniels, a tall woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward first. Her presence alone made Mark shrink back. "Ma'am," she said to Emily, "you're Mrs. Carter, correct?" Emily nodded. "Yes, I'm the owner. The deed is in the folder on the table." Officer Daniels held up the copy Emily had already emailed to the station earlier, now printed and clipped to the report. "Sir," she said, turning to Mark, "we received a report of unauthorized entry, domestic harassment, and refusal to leave the premises. This property is under Mrs. Carter's sole name. She has formally withdrawn consent for you and this other woman to stay here." Mark's voice cracked. "Harassment? Unauthorized? This is my home. I've lived here for years. Officer Daniel's tone stayed professional. You may have lived here, but you are not on the deed or lease. Right now, we're here to prevent further conflict and to make sure everyone leaves peacefully as requested by the legal owner. Anna stared at the paperwork, realization spreading across her face like cold water. He lied, she whispered. He told me he owned this place. He said his name was on everything. He said, we'd be safe here. Mark spun toward her. Anna, please, don't do this. Not now. I was going to make everything right. The officers positioned themselves between him and the hallway. Sir, Officer Daniels repeated, you need to gather your belongings and step outside. You can speak to your lawyer about any rights you believe you have. But tonight, you're leaving. Emily didn't speak as Mark and Anna were escorted to pack the few items they had brought. She simply watched. And for the first time in their relationship, Mark finally understood. She was not the fragile woman he believed she was. She had always been stronger. He just never noticed until it was too late. Neighbors peeked from their doors as Mark and Anna were led down the hallway. Some whispered. Some stared openly. Anna cried loudly, the tears mixing with anger and humiliation. Why did you lie to me? She kept repeating. Why did you say this place was yours? Why did you make me believe you could take care of us? Mark snapped. I was going to. If she had just... But the sentence died as he caught Emily watching from the apartment doorway, calm, composed, and silent. The officers guided him outside. The hallway door closed, and suddenly everything felt quiet again. The downfall began quickly. Emily didn't need to say a word. Everything was already in motion. While Mark stood outside the building, confused and shaking, a black sedan pulled up next to him. A man in a suit stepped out. Someone Mark recognized immediately, his employer's HR manager. Mark Carter, the man asked formally. Mark swallowed. Yes. I'm here on behalf of the company. He handed Mark an envelope. This is regarding your employment. Mark ripped it open with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the words, then widened. Termination, effective immediately, he stammered. Because of conduct harmful to company reputation? The evidence sent to us this morning, the manager said, his tone flat, shows you using company time and benefits while carrying out an affair and creating a hostile domestic situation. It violates our ethics clause and the behavior standards you agreed to. Emily watched from the window. Those photos she had gathered, those timestamps, had traveled fast. Jonathan had forwarded them with a neat, concise summary. Documented infidelity, misuse of time, and potential financial risk to the company. Mark's hands shook violently as he held the letter. No, this can't... But it could, and it was. Next came a tow truck, rolling up slowly, lights flashing. Anna stared in disbelief as a man hooked Mark's leased car and began lifting it. Hey, wait, that's my car, Mark shouted, running forward. No, sir, the man corrected him calmly. It's the bank's car. You're 3 months behind on payments. We gave notice. Today's the repossession date. Mark gaped at him. 3 months? Emily had called the bank earlier that day, not to punish him, but to protect herself from any joint liability. In that call, she learned something Mark never told her. He had been in default for weeks. The repossession order was already scheduled. All she did was step out of the way and let consequences arrive. Mark sank to the curb, hands on his head, realization crashing over him. Anna stood over him with tears streaming down her face. You're a fraud, she cried bitterly. You promised safety. You promised a home. You promised everything. And you have nothing. Mark reached for her, but she stepped back, shaking. I can't do this. I have to think about my baby, she said, voice breaking. I'm leaving. She turned away from him, walking down the street without looking back. Mark stared after her, broken. Emily closed the window quietly. Her phone buzzed. She answered. Mrs. Carter, her lawyer Jonathan said gently, the divorce petition is ready. I've had it filed. We'll arrange for it to be served tonight. You're legally protected, and we'll make sure he can't claim the apartment. Emily exhaled slowly, a breath that sounded like finality, a breath that sounded like freedom. As she ended the call, a soft thought whispered through her mind. Tonight, The last piece will fall into place. The moment Emily stepped into the quiet hallway outside her apartment, the sound of hurried footsteps exploded behind her like a desperate warning. She didn't turn. She didn't pause. She kept her eyes on the divorce papers Jonathan had just handed her in the lobby downstairs. The petition was already filed electronically. This was the physical copy she would sign and keep. She was seconds away from putting ink on the final page when the footsteps stopped abruptly, right beside her. Then Mark collapsed at her feet. Not fell, collapsed. His knees hit the floor so hard the thud echoed through the hallway. "Emily, please," he choked out, grabbing the edge of her coat like a drowning man clinging to the last piece of floating wood. His face was streaked with tears and panic, nothing like the arrogant man who had ordered her to leave her own home hours earlier. This new desperation hit the hallway with the force of a storm. Emily didn't speak, didn't bend down, didn't offer a hand. She simply looked at him with calm, steady eyes, divorce papers still in her hands. "I'm begging you," Mark said, voice cracking. "Don't do this. Don't end us." His breath came out sharp and uneven, his chest rising and falling like he couldn't breathe. He tried to straighten but couldn't. The weight of everything he had lost kept him on the ground. "Anna was a mistake," he cried. "It meant nothing. She meant nothing. The baby, everything, was a moment of weakness. I panicked. I was lonely. I didn't feel good enough for you." He gripped her coat tighter. "I chose you, Emily. I need you. I messed up." He had never sounded smaller. For the first time, Emily let the silence stretch. Not because she was thinking, not because she was unsure, but because this was the first moment he finally realized the truth, that she had the power all along. She slowly crouched down so she could look him in the eyes. Her expression held no anger, no pity, no softness, just truth. "You didn't choose me," she said. Mark stared at her, tears hanging on his eyelashes. "You thought you owned me." Those words hit him harder than any shouting could. His face tightened with grief. He shook his head rapidly. "No, no, Emily. That's not true," he whispered. "You're twisting it. She pulled her coat free from his grip, making him sway slightly as he tried to keep holding on to something no longer his. "You tried to replace me," she continued, "in my home, with my things, with a woman you lied to, and you expected me to accept it because you were confident I would stay silent." Her voice remained steady, calm as ice, sharp as glass. "You didn't love me, Mark. You loved the version of yourself you saw when I trusted you." Mark's face crumpled. "I can change. Please, just give me one chance. Let me fix it." She stood up slowly, the divorce papers still firm in her hand. "I already gave you every chance," she said. "You just didn't notice." Mark tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He sank lower, pressing his palms against the ground, fighting for balance. His shoulders shook as if his entire world had slipped from his grasp, and in a way it had. "Emily, I don't have anything left," he whispered, head bowed. "No home, no job, no car. Anna left. I have nothing." His voice was hollow, broken. Only then did she look down at him with a trace of sorrow, not for him, but for the years she wasted believing he would treasure what she gave. "That was your choice," she said softly. "You built your future without me. Now you can live in it." She stepped back, leaving him on his knees in the hallway. Then she turned and walked toward the stairwell, her steps slow, controlled, final. Mark's shaking voice followed her. "Please, Emily." She didn't answer. When she reached the top of the stairs, she paused. The air around her felt still, heavy with everything unsaid. She turned her head slightly, just enough for her voice to carry back to him. "My grandmother warned me about men like you." Mark froze. His breath hitched, his eyes filled with fresh terror, because in that sentence he finally understood. Emily was no longer his to plead with. As she descended the stairs, a quiet thought echoed through her mind. "And tomorrow he will learn what freedom looks like without me." The first stroke of the paintbrush hit the wall like a declaration. Strong, deliberate, final. Emily dragged the brush across the living room wall with a force she didn't fully notice. The bright new color covered the old one in smooth, slow waves. Every stroke erased a memory, a shadow, a trace of what had happened inside these walls. The intensity of the moment filled the room. Her breath moved fast, almost sharp, as if her body needed to release something trapped for years. Then the pace softened. Her movements slowed. Her shoulders relaxed. She dipped the brush again, this time with calm. The anger and shock that once lived inside her now faded into something quieter. Freedom. The apartment felt different, empty yet warm, still yet alive, as if the space itself was taking a long, overdue breath. Sunlight flowed through the windows, filling the room with soft gold. The floors gleamed. The air felt clean. Each corner looked lighter without the weight of betrayal sitting inside it. Emily stepped back, taking in the freshly painted walls. A small smile touched her lips. She moved through each room with gentle purpose. She opened drawers, removed Mark's leftover belongings, old shirts, a tie, a forgotten watch, placed them in a donation box, and closed the empty drawers with a peaceful finality. She scrubbed the kitchen counters. She replaced old curtains. She moved slowly, lovingly, as if restoring a home and a heart at the same time. Every movement was steady, every breath smooth, every action filled with quiet power. She reached into her bag and pulled out her grandmother's framed photograph, the same picture she held on to during her darkest moments. She placed it carefully on the mantel above the fireplace, in a spot where it would greet her every morning. The apartment felt whole again. So did she. Emily sat on the couch, letting her body sink into the cushions. Soft music played from her speaker, gentle, healing, familiar. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, not rushed, not shaky, steady. Her voice came out in a quiet whisper, as if speaking to the walls themselves. Some people lose everything because they tried to take what was never theirs. The sunlight warmed her face. And some of us finally breathe again. The camera would fade slowly, gently, leaving her in the glow of her new beginning. But just before the moment settled completely, Emily's phone buzzed on the table beside her. She opened her eyes. A small, unread message appeared on the screen. From Jonathan, her lawyer. "There's one more thing we need to discuss about the settlement and his debts. Call me when you're ready." Emily looked at the phone, calm but curious, feeling a soft shift inside her chest. Like the start of a new chapter she didn't expect. Not about Mark, about what came next for her. She reached for the phone slowly. Her story wasn't finished yet. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.